Andrea Slack, okay, K2EZ. Okay, we'll be talking tonight, talking to us tonight about VHF roving, okay, which is an venture in operating. Andrea's been licensed since 1980. Her introduction to amateur radio occurred at age 15 when her father invited her to attend an introductory session of a novice license class at the local amateur radio club was hosting. And she continued to attend with her father, and they both earned their licenses. She's a member of Sussex, where we met a little while back. For many years, Andrea was primarily a CWOP, and she developed an early interest in experimenting with antennas. She also dabbled in wide-ranging aspects of amateur radio, including DXing, contesting satellites, digital communication, traffic handling, races, VHF, weak signal, FM, and repeaters. We could use her here, right? So she currently works as an engineer doing mixed analog, digital, and microprocessor control. Okay. With a passion for VHF roving and mobile ops, she has 3 national first-place VHF contest wins in the limited rover category and currently holds the record for the most number of grids activated in a VHF contest. She set a half a dozen limited rover division score records as one of the top activators in New Jersey during national parks on the air. We've got somebody who knows their stuff. So without further ado, let me turn the program over to Andrea Slack, K2EZ.
Well, thank you everyone for the warm welcome here tonight. As mentioned, I've gotten into VHF roving, and so I first put this presentation together earlier over the summer, and so it's nice to be able to present it again here. Before we get into the main presentation, next slide. Before we get into the main presentation, a fairly brief primer on VHF, UHF, and microwave weak signal operation. Next slide. When it comes to VHF, UHF, most hams tend to think in the sense of FM operation, maybe D-Star, DMR, basically using repeaters and relatively short-range operations. Useful, very useful locally, but you know, other than linking over the internet or something, or some satellites, you're not going to get big distances, and not too exciting, I guess, in other ways. Next slide. What does weak signal VHF, UHF mean? And this generally refers to using modes more associated with HF, and that would be single sideband, CW, digital modes, FT8. There's specialized modes for weak signals such as moon bounce and meteor scatter. Next slide. Basically, these modes are more efficient, and they allow using propagation modes that are usually not strong enough to carry FM signals. FM, you need a lot stronger signal than sideband, as an example. Next slide. One of these modes, and this is primarily on 6 meters, is E-skip, but I've worked some E-skip on 2 meters. And occasionally, I know people caught it up on 222 megahertz, although that gets extremely rare. E-skip is very similar to HF propagation, so those of you who operate HF, it'll be very similar ranges, 700 to 1,000 miles, very typical. And you can have very strong signals on 6 meters if E-skip's going on. You could work that on FM. 2 meter E-skip, you probably can work that on FM as well. Next slide. Troposcatter, tropospheric scatter, or simply tropo as we tend to say, is the bread and butter of the VHF, UHF weak signal operation. This mode is where the atmosphere basically scatters the signal, refracts the signal back to the Earth. So You put signal out towards the horizon, the atmosphere scatters it and bends it, and returns it to Earth. And like the diagram here showing a bunch of line of sight signals, a lot of people tend to think of VHF, UHF as a line of sight mode. The troposcatter, since it scatters up high in the atmosphere and bends, you can get significantly longer distances from a relatively small station on VHF running weak signal, which is typically run horizontally polarized. You can expect 150 miles is not particularly challenging. A good station can expect to see 200 to 300 miles to another fairly good station. Contest high, best stations out there can do 300 to 400 miles almost day in, day out. That's how reliable troposcatter is, or tropo. You can have enhancements on tropo, which will strengthen signals, and this is usually what you see on FM, like you start hearing some distance repeaters coming in. That's when there's been some enhancement, and you can get much further distances. Next slide. One variation of tropo is the tropospheric duct, or it's just simply ducting as it's called, where you have a couple thermal layers and the signal bounces between those thermal layers and can get carried a long distance before it comes back to Earth. One of the most well-known ducts for long-distance operation is between Hawaii and California. It's not always there, but it opens up frequently enough to make those 1,000+ mile contacts between stations, sometimes with very good signals. People have been trying to work across the Atlantic using tropospheric propagation, and there is some evidence. I don't know what country, where D44 Charlie contest station, anybody know where that is? It's off the coast of Africa.
Yeah, Cape Verde.
Yeah, Cape Verde. Yeah, signals from a beacon on Cape Verde were heard on, Papa Juliet's, just off Venezuela.
Curacao, Bonaire, Aruba.
Yeah, Bonaire, I believe it was. So it was heard across the Atlantic, but since nobody was at D44 to operate, no two-way contact has been established. So that was another case of very good tropospheric propagation and likely a duct going. I've seen a video of the signals, and they were like S9 across the Atlantic on 2 meters. Next slide. Meteor scatter propagation. In the past, this was a very difficult mode to operate, but it's basically like ESKIP, except it involves bouncing signals off ionization path created by meteors passing through the atmosphere. So it's not like the ionosphere, the F layer propagation that you see on HF, that's much higher, but it's very similar to ESKIP propagation. Problem is, it only lasts for a fraction of a second. A really good meteor might give you 3, 4, 5 seconds worth of propagation. But statistically, there's going to be something that occurs quite frequently within a minute or two between any two given points that are within the range, 700 to 1,000 miles, upwards of about 1,400 kind of tops out. But these days with digital modes, what they do is go and they send the data real fast, repeatedly, and as long as you get propagation open for about 40 milliseconds, somewhere between 40 and 100 milliseconds, you'll get the entire message across. So they just sit there and they transmit, until it gets through, and then the other side goes and transmits. And the mode is very similar to FT8 in that it makes a contact. So it's one of the Joe Taylor modes. So that's one specialized for VHF. Next slide. EME, Earth, Moon, Earth. It's not new. In the past, this mode took a lot of power, a lot of antenna to make it work and pass some CW signals. These days, digital modes have made it more accessible to people. A large, like 20-foot long, 70-centimeter Yagi with a couple 100 watts can be enough to do EME. A long 2-meter Yagi, similar. Next slide. Anyone here not know what a main head grid square is? All right, everybody knows. Grid squares are very central to VHF operating. Rather than worrying about state boundaries where people out in the West got these big states and have a hard time making any distance, a lot of the awards and scoring in contests are based upon Maidenhead grid squares, and it kind of evens the playing field rather than using states or counties, etc. Next slide. VHF roving, an adventure in VHF operating. This map here, coincidentally, not coincidentally since I put it in there, is from my first roving experience. I kind of fell into roving accidentally, I say, because I was going on a road trip to visit a friend up in Minneapolis, and then I was going to proceed from there out to my daughter's place in Utah. I had this road trip set, I had HF in the car, and then I heard there's a VHF contest weekend I was leaving. I'm like, VHF is easier to work from the car than HF. I can keep myself occupied. I started looking at the rules, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, but that's how I fell into it. Next slide. So what is a rover and what is roving? Almost all the VHF contests support a rover category. And simply put, a rover is a station that moves from grid square to grid square during the contest. Unlike a fixed station, which you can usually only work once per band in the contest, a rover, once a rover changes grids, they're fair game for a new contact. So rovers, well, the fixed stations run into a problem because all the fixed stations they can easily get, they kind of work in a certain period of time. And then it comes down to pointing antennas and waiting for a duct to form, conditions to occur. These days with digital modes, a lot of times at night, they'll hop on and try and pick up meteor scatter, which is a very good time for doing that. But rovers, since they're moving around, they're a source of contact that can occur during the contest. Stations compete in whatever category, multi-ops against other multi-ops, single ops against single ops. Rovers similarly compete against other rovers. There's actually 3 categories of rovers in the ARRL contest. Limited, which is 4 bands, so you can kind of get into it, get your feet wet. A classic rover, which can run up to a kilowatt on any band from 6 meters up to light. And then unlimited, which is basically the same as classic, except they can do what's called grid circling. And grid circling kind of means if you've got rovers at a grid corner, you kind of hop across, and there's 16 different combinations you can get at a grid corner, and then you work whatever bands you have with those stations. And if you've got 10 bands, there's 160 contacts you can make. It's a controversial practice, so it's kind of, that's what that unlimited rover category is for. Classic and limited rovers can do a limited amount of grid circling. They're limited to 100 Qs with any one station, but some have demonstrated they can really exploit that. Next slide. Roving itself is just a process of moving from grid to grid. Sometimes we'll say, well, I'll be out roving in the contest. That's all that means. And I do want to highlight on this particular slide, we've got W6TAI. She's out here adjusting this antenna setup. You'll see this same antenna setup on a number of other slides, and that's because those setups were all put together by Wayne, November 6, November Bravo, N6NB. And Wayne's well known in the roving world for a lot that he has done. So that'll come up, but here you've got a tri-band quad, a couple loop Yagis on the left-hand side, and a dish that's probably 10 gigs and 5.7 gigs, maybe 24 gigs as well. Next slide. How does one qualify as a rover? As a general rule, rovers must operate from 2 or more grids. If you're only operating in one grid, you're not really roving. Although some of the contests do allow single grid rovers, because someone may go on a grid and then go to another grid and not be able to work anybody. So rather than exclude them, they do let them do that. Rovers in all the contests I'm aware of need to identify as rover or /R, and in the logbook it has to get put with the /R. That's an important part because, let me put it this way, the station that, like I work, K2BAR, a Barra station, and they don't put the /R, during log checking, me, the rover, will get penalized because of that. It'll be a not in log. Ironically, the fixed station doesn't get penalized because rovers are allowed to operate as a fixed station and it'll get treated as a non-submitted log fixed station. So I try and educate people on that. And lastly, all the equipment for the rover and operators must be transported in a single vehicle. The definition of vehicle is very loose. I mean, it could be a freight train. It could be your sneakers. In fact, you can go grid circle, one grid, another grid, back, kind of walk around. It's not quite that like that because usually there's a rule that says you have to move 100 yards or something. So you got to do a 100-yard sprint and work the next grid. But anything you can fit in a vehicle. I think the unlimited category could technically go to fixed stations and plug in and use that hardware. But again, it depends upon the rules, and some contests, like the C2 Worldwide contest, only has one rover category. Next slide. To kind of put things in context, because it's very easy to look at some of the vehicles out here that people do roving in and just say, oh my God, that's a ton of work. But you don't need to jump right to do that, or even ever do that, to go out there and rove and have some fun. Rovers can be simple. All it takes is some sort of multi-mode rig. Technically, you can get out there and operate FM, and there is an FM only category, but not as a rover. But you're going to find limited opportunities on FM because most people in the contest are operating single sideband or CW or digital modes. FT8 is kind of distorting the way things work. Don't see that on HF affecting anything at all, right? The other thing is you need a horizontally polarized antenna. So those little vertical whips that you use on FM, on sideband, we use horizontally polarized antennas. Well, making an Omni is kind of hard. Dipoles are become somewhat directive. So for an Omni on horizontally polarized, it's very common to use half-wave loops, which are basically like these cobweb antennas that wrap each element around. It's a half-wave dipole kind of wrapped in the circle, There's some tuning elements in here, and the gap actually affects the tuning quite a bit. So on this particular one I have in my hand here, there's some screws. If you need to tune it, you undo the screw, you kind of slide it, and you put the screw in the new spot. And hopefully the new spot isn't like too close to the screw hole. So I'll pass this around for everyone who wants to see how that's. So a simple rover can literally, in this case, we've got somebody here who's got a tripod, small mast, small Yagi, looks like a 2-meter Yagi, and they've got a little stool there to sit on. They've got a rig. I don't know if they've got a power source or they're hooking it in, but everything can be carried inside the vehicle, taken out, set up on site. There's a lot of rovers that will operate from one hilltop. Some people combine it with soda operations, summits on the air. And we'll go do one summit, one day of a contest, and the next day do another summit. So you don't need to mount hardware on the vehicle, don't have to mess up your nice vehicle. Although I'll tell you, a 2-meter Yagi looks pretty small until you still put it inside a car, and somehow they become very awkward. Next slide. Okay, Omni Antennas I already talked about a little bit. Round loops like the one I've got passing around. M squared makes a little square loop. The round one's actually got a little tuning element inside the plastic box, where the square one has a tuning stub. I find the square one's very tough to tune. You got too many things that have to get moved around. But both of those operate effectively the same. They're omnidirectional. They don't have any gain to speak of. They're like about 2 dBi, a little bit worse than a dipole. The only reason they show any gain at all is because when you put it over the ground, it tends to flatten out the pattern. If you look at it in free space, they're about as close to an isotropic antenna as you can get. I mean, it's not even the donut of a dipole. Omnis are also a common staple for rovers that operate on the move. Since you can't have multiple operators, that makes even on-the-move operation even easier, I should say. I do some operation on the move, some operation fixed. Next slide. Directional antennas, a Yagi can give you, or quad, provide some extra signal, some oomph downrange. You know, a short 2-meter Yagi can give you 10 times as much signal. You can get 10 dB out of a 2-meter Yagi pretty easy. 6-meter Yagis, like shown in this picture here, are a little bit too wide really to be carried on a vehicle. You can legally go up to 8 foot wide, but I think most 6-meter Yagis go a little bit beyond that. Some people have done it. I don't know if this got put up on site or while moving here in this particular image, but I will point out there's that curious multi-element, multi-band quad that you saw before, and a little box up there which has transverters. Next slide. A very common setup for rovers is a fixed mount directional antennas. This is N0LD Rover, and he's got some Omni antennas here. He's actually got stacked 2-meter antennas. They're in phase. And he's got some Yagis. He's got 70 centimeters at the top, then 2 meters, then 1 1/4, and then I believe that's 1296. There's a little 6-meter loop down towards the back. But this whole arrangement sits on top of his roof rack, and there's no rotator, so it's very simple. He just points his vehicle. And the neat thing about that is you can usually do it pretty quick, but you do need the room to move the vehicle back and forth. But he does this out in the Midwest, and he says, usually all the stations are in one direction from wherever he stops. So, simple operation. Let's see, next slide. And then we get to rotatable antennas. And on this rover here, there's a trailer hitch mast comes up to a rotator, and then a few antennas up on the rotator. It's got some straps tying it back to the roof rack. And it's got loops, looks like 902, 1296, 70 centimeters, 2 meters, 1 1/4, and there's a Moxon. A Moxon is a variant on the 2-element 6-meter beam. They're a little bit smaller, so 6-meter Moxons are found a lot on Rovers. The station, he's got his bigger antennas lower. The general wisdom is you put your lower frequency antennas higher up because they're more affected by the ground. Whereas 1296 doesn't care whether you're this high off the ground or that. It's a lot of wavelengths anyway. But this person has it configured differently. Now, I don't know if you noticed, but through the same several slides here, there's one common theme. And that's all that these setups, like this one here, if you unhook it from that trailer hitch mount and untie it from the roof rack, that whole thing comes off the vehicle fairly easy. The prior one, mounted on the roof rack, that comes off. Before that, we had deploying out of the vehicle. Obviously, these are setups that people put together for the contests, but it's not a full-time dedicating a vehicle. If you look at what people do, they have like go kits sometimes, they put them on their passenger seat or in the back seat where they have the operator. Next slide. Oh. When it comes to rotatable antennas, sometimes you can't rotate them on the move. But let's hope Peter VA3ELE doesn't rotate this massive 70 centimeter antenna that he carries here. I don't know how long that is, but I think it's like 20-something feet, 24 feet maybe. Now, he's out in Canada there, and he won the 70 centimeter sprint with that antenna set up in the spring. So I gotta give him credit because everything that he had to reach was far away. Next slide. Tower trailers. Again, this, you know, the trailer counts as part of the vehicle here. So this is another way of getting some more reach. And again, it doesn't impact the vehicle. The whole station could be out on the trailer. And one of the things I want to highlight is a lot of times you see there's a box up there behind the dish. For the microwave stuff, your feed line losses get so bad, they put the transverters up on the tower to do that. And for the microwave, generally once you get beyond 1.2 gigahertz and even below, a lot of people are using transverters because nobody makes dedicated rigs up that, or doesn't make many options to have dedicated rigs up there. Next slide. And then lastly, there's some mega rovers out there. This one is the K8GP rover. You can't really see the van too well in this picture, but if you look close, you'll see some of the Omnis that they've got for on-the-move operation. Inside there, they take 2 banks of batteries, they stack them up, get 24 volts, and they run a kilowatt on everything from 70 centimeters on down. They've got a huge, I think, 35-foot mast, pneumatic mast on the back of it, and then a 25-foot one on the front. I've seen them set this up. It takes them about 10 minutes. The 6-meter beam is so big, they actually mount it to the side of the van with the elements sticking up. And they've turned in some impressive scores. The downside is the complexity of their system has taken them out of the competition about half the contests that they've gone in with that. Because something goes on the vehicle or the hardware operation. This case, it's a dedicated vehicle that they use just for contesting. And next slide. So why get out there and row? Well, sometimes maybe you can't operate from your house. You got an HOA to deal with. Maybe it's just too noisy, or maybe you like VHF and it's not why I did it, but I don't have any substantial VHF stuff on my own house, even now that I've gotten into it, because I'm in a valley. I'm at like 850 feet on the side of a hill that goes 1,200 feet. Across the lake, there's another 1,200 foot ridge. The only place I can see any distance is like northeast. And then I can see about 5 miles, which if I was interested in, I probably could work New England, but any place else it's really tough from there. So that's one reason, it gets you out. Next slide. You get to see the world. You know, you're doing some contesting, maybe you're serious, maybe you're not, but you're not in your shack all the time, but you're getting out and seeing some things. This is a picture when I was over in Wyoming, actually. This was in national parks on the air, not a VHF, but I did try and scare up VHF contacts out there. There's nobody out in Wyoming, even when you're in Wyoming. You know, you can combine a Rove with a road trick, which I've done a whole bunch of times right now, and that, like I mentioned before, that's how I got started. Next slide. You like being part of the pack. I talked about grid circling before, and the potentials of grid circling certainly has not been lost on Rovers. And N6NV put together literally packs of Rovers to go out. Especially, they're all microwave equipped, and they go out. I think this is Joshua National Park, Joshua Tree National Park. And so he's gone out there, and they've organized, and before some limits got put on grid circling, turned out scores that were, I mean, in the VHF world, W2SZ turns out like always the top score. They beat W2SZ in Rovers. And were able to set a club score that took down the Mount Airy VHF. So that was one of the things that kind of raised some eyebrows, and they haven't done it since the unlimited low Rover category has that. They haven't really seemed interested since that was created. In part, that takes down the club competition, but it just seems a little bit too off to the side. But you can get in with the community of people that are going out, and some people enjoy that, even a smaller group. I've thought of having the K2EZ HT giveaway in Old Tappan, New Jersey, which is right where the grid corner is. For the amount of consumables I burn in a row, because I do it pretty seriously, I can get myself probably, 20 HTs and give them away to people and just have them work around in the grid corner. That really comes into manufacturing contacts, but
Everybody should be out there.
what's that?
I think everybody should be out there with an HT when there's a VHF contest, doing FM. The grid square is right 10 miles, not even 10 miles
Yeah.
from here. It's Rivervale, Old Japan. And you can go around the circle there and you can get all kinds of points.
Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, it's a terrible area.
It's in the valley.
So it's not like I can go there and rove there. During sprints, I'll rove 4 grids, but I'll start there at Mount State Park. Then I'll go up Route 9 on the Palisades, which is pretty good in
Kind
FM
of state
30.
line,
What's that?
state line
I
lookout.
usually don't go to State Line Lookout when I've gone there.
Coleman?
I've worked everybody I can from 9, so.
Oh, from Route 9, sure.
From Route 9, so it takes too much time to get there. And then I
Yeah,
go up to, I was going to the Islamic Center in Nyack, New York.
Okay.
That's really high.
So,
It's
yeah.
nice and high, and there was a tower there. But there's big signs that say no trespassing.
Yeah, they're kind of high security.
And, yeah, and the gate was kind of open, you could drive up in the tower, and I've been going there for 3 years, I never had a problem, although sometimes they came pretty close to locking me in. So I'd see them, and actually, they had a block once I came, and I said, I'm just using my radio, and they were always like, fine, fine, fine. But then one time, one person, I don't know who it is there, said, you can't be here. Okay. So now I kind of trying, I'm not sure what I'm gonna do about that. Next slide.
Convert.
You'd like to entertain the drivers on the road.
Oh, wow.
I mean, somebody was talking about, why we were going out in Rove, and one of the guys commented, it's like, I thought we went out there to entertain the drivers. And it is, there's a lot of truth to that. You look at how many people, if you got antennas on your car like that, the people who take pictures. If I had one contest point for everybody I see taking a picture during the contest, I would win every contest. I mean, there's a lot. Well, a lot of people think I'm a storm chaser. Storm chaser is probably number one. After that, I've actually had a few people think is when I only had loops that it was fishing related. Some people think I'm some sort of government vehicle. That's probably the second one after storm chasing. I kind of like the fact that people assume that sometimes because it can't keep you out of people from asking too many questions. Next slide. And lastly, last reason here, VHF contesters really love the Rovers. If you get out there and Rove, they're like, when's your next grid? They want to know because you're another contact. Rovers go to grids that may not have any station there. They know you're going to be changing something into another grid, so you're somebody they can follow and make some more points. And if you've got multiple bands, when you change bands, it's one contact per band. So it's like 4 more contacts. The upper bands are more points on that. Note on this particular band that there's multiple sets of those funny quads and multiple sets of those little things. All those setups were made to go on cars, and what Wayne actually, in his Rover groups, they put them on people's cars, whoever's cars it is. They even went places and rented cars and put them on the rental cars. So I'm pretty sure that this particular van is one of their vans after they've been out on the road and put them all on top of that one vehicle. Next slide. How often can one Rove, if you're doing this? There are 3 major ARRL contests. The June VHF contest, which is the biggest one. It's very popular because 6 meters tends to be open there, and a lot of people like 6 meters open. I'm kind of, to me, that's more like an HF contest. And even though you can get lots of contacts, I like the grinding through contacts. I like the tropo propagation, the real tough work. I've kind of optimized being able to jump between bands, because that's one skill. If you get out there, you work somebody on one band, typically 6 meters or 2 meters is the one you may find them on. You're like, what other bands do you have? And then you go and you jump through all the bands you can. It's somewhat annoying though, if you're new to this and you come in, you hear somebody saying that and it's like, oh, let's go to this band, and boom, they're gone. You can't find them again. You learn after a while to go hop on that other band and hope that you can hear them on the other band, because maybe you found them on 6 where the antennas aren't real directional, but now they're jumping up on 70 centimeters where now their antennas are real narrow, and it's like, am I going to hear them or not? The major ARRL contests, June, September, and January. Each one's a little bit different in terms of character. Obviously, January tends to be the one without much enhanced propagation. September sometimes sees some 6-meter openings. This last September, nothing. I don't think anywhere in the country saw a 6-meter open at all. So it was one of those contests I'd like to kind of grind through on that. You've got the ARRL 22 megahertz and up distance contest in August. This one used to be called the UHF contest, and I really liked it because 222 is my favorite band. It's quiet, and it has propagation very much like 2 meters, and I enjoyed that band a lot. Or that contest a lot. I only had 2 bands when I ran it, but now they've made it a distance contest, and so you don't get, it doesn't quite work the same, so I don't enjoy it as much as I did. CQ Worldwide, VHF in July, that is just 6 meters and 2 meters. And it's set up when there's a lot of E-skip. It is a worldwide contest, not just the United States or North America. That one tends to be a 6-meter contest. 6 meters will be open someplace in the world on those days, and so that one tends to be dominated by 6-meter contacts, especially since there's only one other band besides 6 meters. There's also VHF, UHF, and microwave sprints. There's the spring sprints and the fall sprints. The spring sprints are kind of like shake down your equipment getting ready for June. The fall sprints are just kind of like keep you interested in the fall. Like, you know, they're not as popular as the spring sprints. I enjoy the sprints. They're little 4-hour contests that occur in the evening. 2 meters is on Monday, and then the following week on Tuesday you got the 1 1/4 meter sprint, and then the week after that you got the 70 centimeter sprint on Wednesday, and then 6 meters on Saturday, and then or maybe the microwave on Saturday, and then the next one is 6 meters. So you've got those two sprints. So you can focus on those bands. That's why you had Peter there with that 24-foot long, 70 centimeter Yagi. He only had to worry about one band. So there's quite a bit of time, and I started finding myself getting ready for the spring sprints, and I only had Omnis at the time. But then enough stuff was coming up that it was too complex to take apart and put together between them, so I tended to put it together for the first spring sprint, which was like right after Easter, and then leave it on the car until the fall. And then I take it off, but it has become too complex since then, and I don't take it apart anymore. Next. Also, getting started, learn who the local players are in terms of the VHF. The ARRL contests let you coordinate by going on chat pages, text messaging, and if you find, you know, the local players, they can help you get in contact with other people in the area that you're likely to work, and you can alert them. One of the problems with Meteor Scatter or FT8 in particular is they'll sit on this digital mode and they won't even know you're on the air. And that's been the downside, and that's kind of been changing. So that's a good way to kind of get out, and that made a big difference in my own operating, learning who some of the big players were in the area. My first time out, I was totally cold, didn't know anything. Next slide. Little footnote for the beginner. If you're mounting antennas to your car, know how high it is. And particularly in the Northeast here, be aware of parkways. Palisades Parkway, Sawmill River Parkway, that one's got a,
9 foot 7.
I went down that one when my first Rove where I had the Explorer, which was actually my second Rove. I went down that road and I had 11 feet and I saw one is 10 foot 8 inches. Okay, it's plenty of art, not a problem. Next one said 8 foot 8 inches, and you were mentioning that. That was a bit more hair raising. There was enough for it to fit underneath. I don't know if I can fit underneath it anymore because I am now, instead of 11 feet, 12 foot 6 inches is my height right now. And so I don't go on that anymore. But you will notice right here, this little sign that says 12 foot 1 inches. And what's that?
Is that the middle or the edge?
Presumably it's the edge. So, but a little bit of story behind this. This was from the June contest. Rhea, N2RJ, it's the only time I've rode with somebody, she was riding in the back. I have no passenger in the front seat. There's no room for passenger. The only place anybody can fit is directly behind me, and that's if I punch the seat forward. And I gotta give Rhea a lot of credit for joining me and riding in the back seat for basically 33 hours of contest with maybe a 4-hour overnight. It's a lot of work. But she knew we had 12 foot 6 inches limits here. Well, we had a problem, and I've kind of learned this, traffic in the summer. On Sunday, getting up in Connecticut, we just hit traffic. And I said, Rhea, take a look at the map, and I had a tablet. I said, see if you can find a route. He was like, well, I don't really know maps very well. So she pulls out Waze and gets an alternate route. I'm like, okay. So just tell me where to go. And she says, oh, exit 2 miles up. We're going up, getting on the highway, and I run cart cameras all the time. So it's not like I went and took this picture. I extracted it off the video. We're going on there. She relays to me a contact that had to get logged, and I'm like, Rhea, this road looks suspiciously like a parkway. And she's like, and she starts to look. And not that long after that, there was an overpass. The edges were clearly low. It had a high arc in it, so nothing to worry about. But I did get into the middle on that. I'm like, okay, well, yeah, there were no trucks to be seen. It was all night. And so we're going along. I'm like, okay, how far do we have to go? She's like, 31 miles. All right, so we're not having much luck, and we're trying to make a judgment call here. We don't know really what the heights are on this, except there's potential risk of something low on the parkway that will force us to have to come to a dead stop and maybe take something off the car. What to get off the car is not real clear at this point. I haven't had to do that. And so, but if we got off the highway at the first exit, we knew we were not going to make our final grids. It was going to hurt the contest effort. So we're kind of looking through the maps now, trying to figure out when we can get off this thing as soon as possible. There was a way to get over the highway about 15 miles ahead. We can cut off, spend a mile on a local road. So decided to go for that, but we're moving down here and we see the sign that says 12'1" as we're coming up. This was not the first sign. There was, well, we saw the sign quite a bit further back than right here. Having been down this before on the Sawmill Parkway as one, those little curves in the bridge could really bail you out. So 12'1", I did not immediately panic. Then I looked at this bridge and I'm like, that ain't got a lot of arc to it. I'm like, ugh. But, you know, I do this mental calculation. I'm like, well, I've got 12 foot 6 inches. I'm like, there's gotta be at least 6 inches in arc. And besides, the 12'1" probably has margin built into it. And worst comes to worst, my top 6 inches is my HF width. And if I hit anything on that, that will flex. It's already bent backwards, so this, really 12 foot is my hard limit. So I'm thinking to myself, okay, I've got this. All I have to do is get down the middle. Rhea doesn't know I've done this mental calculation, however. And so she's going 12'1". And just as I'm thinking to myself, I got this, all I have to get in the middle, I go in the middle, and there's a car. So I'm like, you know, taking a picture, whatever. I probably could have cut it off, but it wasn't a crisis point yet. So, all right, just hit the brake a little bit, car will go past. So I hit the brake. Not super hard, but hard enough. This car didn't know why I hit the brake or whatever. Probably look at me. They decided to hit the brake too. Meanwhile, Rhea's like 12'1". Again, you know, and so all this is happening pretty quick. And then I stand on the brakes hard, and the car. They get hard on the brakes, but finally let it off and go past. Rhea again is 12'1". By this point, while we're decelerating heavily, and I've heard her say this for the third time, I'm like, I go finally answer and go, I know. And then finally the car gets in front of me and I move in the middle and we go through. So no issue there, down the center. But there was a few tense moments there. But if you listen to it on the video, it's funny because I kind of stretched it out here, but it's like 12'1", 12'1", 12'1". And I'm like, I know. Exactly. All right, next slide. Other things, learn the contest rules. Of course, you need to know this. The allowed bands vary. ARRL ones are consistent, but there are changing. Scoring differs, especially multipliers. The 222 megahertz and up is completely different scoring from the other ARRL contests. CQ allows you to accumulate multipliers all over again when you change grids. CQ doesn't allow for texting, self-spotting, or phone calls. ARRL does. Family rule. If you got multiple hands in the family, that can be powerful for rovers, and that's one thing N6NB also exploited by finding couples. So not only was there a pack, but some of those rovers had 2 operators in them, as long as family. He has one family of 4 he crams into a rover. Normally, somebody using a piece of equipment, be it the antenna, radio, etc., if it's used for one station in a contest, it can't be used by anybody else in the contest. Now, a lot of us carry in, and it's gotten nicknamed the Bofang bucket, HTs. You have them in one place, and if you run into somebody that's ham, you hand them an HT, you work them, and then you put that in the used HT bucket, so to speak. But the family rule is an exception to that, because the WRL assumes that a family probably isn't gonna have multiple stations, allows different members of the family to operate that single station, whether it's fixed or a rover, to have different operators and use different call signs, each operator's call sign. So occasionally, there's a couple fixed stations I know where there's a husband and wife, and they, both operators will get on, and you can work one and then work the other. But, so there's, you've got multiple hams in the family, you get out in Rove, you can give out even more points. Next slide. Few odds and ends. ON4KST has chat pages. I just Google it, and then they have chat pages for region 2, 2 meters, 70 centimeters, I think one for 6 meters. And people arrange skids there. This is a nice thing about having another operator get on there. When I'm operating alone, it's very difficult for me to get on that. Bring a compass. When I first started using directional antennas, I got up to a hilltop and had no idea where I was pointing. Your phone apps can help you with your grid square, and the phone app even has a compass built into it. Discovered in that other bullet point there about bringing a compass, sometimes it flips around and it points you the other way. You also have to get away from the vehicle, and that messes things up. You know, a laptop, you gotta think about how you're gonna log. A lot of Rovers log on paper and then transfer it digitally. If you're stopping a small laptop, the little Apple MacBook here I've used for logging, I actually have a tablet and my own software for logging, which makes it a lot easier for me for my type of operation. And let's see what's next. So whether it's big or small, get out there, have some fun. If you're gonna only operate, you know, size it to whatever you want. You can do little, you can do big. If you're only operating part of contests, Sunday is a quieter time, so people will tend to find you more there, and so you can have some more fun. And real quick, we're pretty much at the end here. Just my first Rove, January 2015. I started out with some dipoles. I just kind of made a little dipole there, mounted it to the tire rack. Next slide. And I had the FT736 from satellite stuff I did back in the 90s. And literally just had this one piece of wood, a bungee cord, put that there, IC7000 that I used for 6 meter FM and 70 centimeters. It's my only 70 centimeter rate, it still is. And the FT450 was what I was using on 6 meters there. It's on 80 meters because I was doing HF just before I took the picture. And the FT736 is really 2 meters and 1 1/4 meters. That's why I use that on. It's one of the few rigs that you could get that band on. Next slide. In June 2015, after doing this thing on this road trip, I thought, you know, that's a lot of fun. I should do something more serious. So I went and I got some proper Omni antennas, just one each, mounted them up on a mast, and I put that on a car, and I looked up and I'm like, I'm gonna die from embarrassment. I've gotten over that. This particular picture found its way back to me. It was taken by a non-ham who saw me driving along the road in Massachusetts here, sent it over to a ham friend of hers, said, this must be one of your ilk. The term she used. Now, he happened to know me. And so he's not, oh, yes, not only is she one of our ilk, but I know her, so I ended up getting a picture. So this is one of the few pictures I have of out of the tens of thousands pictures that must be out there on the internet someplace. This is one of the few I actually have.
I wonder how many people in this room have a picture of the truck.
So basically, more loops. I think I had one amp, my 2-meter amp, which I've had from like 1987. I had that in the back seat. I didn't have amps for the other bands, and it was just a mess of cables. Next slide. Still pretty much the same setup inside. I just took a piece of wood there, plopped it in the other seat, and some bungee cords, hold it in place. And yes, I realize if I get in an accident, it will not be pretty. Those things are going to move. And my antennas will probably not keep my vehicle from rolling over. It's, you know, it's one of those trades. So I call this Rover Mark II on this one. Next slide. So I got through 2015, and then January 2016, that mast on the rear, which is pretty much what it is now, it's unchanged. I now had stacked 2-meter loops, stacked 1¼ meter loops, which immediately is 3 dB gain, but it pulls the pattern a little closer to the horizon, which gives you a subjective closer to 5 dB gain. I added amps, so now I had amps for the 3 bands. I'm running limited Rover category, just the bottom 4 bands, 6 meters, 2 meters, 1¼ meters, 70 centimeters. Those were the 4 bands that I was operating. We had snow like 2 days before this contest. This is on a 2,600-foot hill in Pennsylvania near Connellsburg. Really nice hill for Rovers. The hilltop, the road up to the hilltop, though, was snowed in. I saw a bunch of Jeeps kind of stuck trying to get up there, and I'm like, I'm not going there. But there's this tower, a driveway by the tower that I parked in. A lot of people ask me about the loops that are standing like this, vertically. Those are 2-meter loops, but I use them on 70 centimeters. 3rd harmonic. They were sold as, quote, a dual band loops and mounted horizontally. And since it was bigger, I asked the guy who made it, like, is there any gain to this thing? You know, it's got a bigger capture area. You would expect more gain. He said, I don't know, it just tunes up. There's a warning sign right there. I hadn't had much luck on 70 centimeters, so I did some modeling on it. And I discovered that that loop, dual band loop, when I tried using it on 2 meters, shot all the energy straight up in the air pretty much. It was minus 5 dBi on the horizon. And not just the horizon, but the horizon to like 30 degrees above the horizon is terrible. So I said, well, what happens if you stand them up, just for the heck of it? And well, it went from minus 5 dBi to plus 7 dBi on the horizon by standing them up. They became directional, about 120 degrees is the 3 dB down pattern. So I said, you know what, I'll put 2 of them, put a little switch, and I'll get a little bit of gain on that band, and it wouldn't be much harder to use than the Omni. You just flip the switch for whatever one that sounds better. And that's why I have that distinctive 2 loops on the back of the car. Next slide. And again, this is Rover Mark III in January. There I have the amplifiers. I organize things. I put them on this nice piece of wood so I can take them out of the vehicle, put it into the vehicle, and hook up the coaxes. In this little yellow and red container on the floor is a second battery to handle the peak currents. I have 180 watts on 2 meters there using that amp from 1987. I have 100 watts on 1¼ meters. I have that actually limited to 100 since limited Rovers that, but it actually will do 120 if I take that out. and then 90 watts on 70 centimeters. Next slide. And that stayed from January 2016 all the way through January, all the way through, 2016, all the way through 2017. January 2018, I missed, the vehicle was not running. I had a electrical short that was blowing the fuse. I had to be in Texas for work. I would have had to fly home on a Friday, find the problem somewhere between like 10 p.m. when I arrived and like noon the next day. And I hadn't been able to find it before. By the way, getting stuff on the car like this, it's hard to get in a shop. So I've had to learn a lot about working on the car and finding problems, because it comes down to, do I take all this stuff off the car, or do I find how to fix it? Anyway, I missed that one, but anyway, in 2017, I did get a first place in January and first place in June. Those were my first two first place limited Rover Roves. I'm working towards getting from limited into classic Rover. Let somebody else have fun in limited Rover, since I appear to be getting pretty good at it. And that's when I added the Aggies on the front. HF antenna actually upgraded someplace in there. I think that was in 2016 also. No, 2017 when I upgraded the HF antenna. I started getting the microwave bands. I'm not using those in the major contests, but in the microwave sprints. Added a flex radio. That's partly to get some pan adapters so I can find stations easier, and working with transverters. Next slide. So now on the back, not only do I have amps, but I got this whole other piece of wood here. Got the flex radio mounted to a transverter, a whole bank of RF relays that cost a small fortune. I'll tell you this, once you buy a flex radio, everything else in ham radio looks a lot cheaper. I used to be scared off by a rotator. It's like, what, several $100s for a rotator? And once I got the flex, I'm like, $400? Paying off my house helped. So a bunch of relays, and I have a little switch box, so I can actually steer the antennas from the Aggies to the Omnis or back. So that makes that very handy. There's a couple actual physical switches, and this lets me, since I'm slowly taking over with the flex radio, I still have the other rigs there. And when I was very young, I did a lot of work with antennas, and I improved a lot of antennas, or made antennas that I made better, that were worse actually. And so I'm very reticent to break things that were working so well. And so the Aggies were a big improvement, but I hate to give up on these or the existing rigs. So I've kind of tried to transition this without disturbing. So next slide. Along with the flex radio, added a console in the front, flex control. I also have my old grandfather's old Morse code key in there, which when I can't work with somebody on sideband, going to CW, comes in handy. The console here though lets me use the flex radio pan adapter, and I can also run FT8 on that, because FT8 is becoming a significant thing. And so to kind of maintain competitiveness, I needed that ability to find people there. And next one, any questions?
One questions on that roof that you showed. That's a 2 meter?
This is a 1 1/4 meter. 2 meters is a little bit.
Small too. When you shifted it to the vertical plane, the polarization changed to vertical too.
No, it didn't. Because it's
Why
like
not?
a quad. It comes down to, when the loop's this way, it's going to be horizontal.
Right.
But when you've got like a quad, it's the feed point. This would be
Ah,
vertically
yes.
polarized, this is horizontal.
Have you tried using two of them, say, in phase, traditional gain?
I haven't, I've looked at it though. I looked at what happened if you took two of them and put them in phase, and it actually looks pretty attractive for a compact, 70 centimeters.
Halfway spacing between them on 2 meters, what is it, it'll be, it's not very big.
Yeah, not that big.
39 inches.
And on 70 centimeters though, setting it up with that loop, for the physical area was, question?
You may have mentioned, do you operate while you're driving, and if so, how do you log, and how do you drive?
Well, for one, I'm recording everything, and I have gone back to the recording to fill some things. It depends. I do have a tablet, which is touchscreen, so it has a keyboard very big. It's set up with keys of stations that I know I can reach, and what grids they are, so I can work them now. I mean, it's not like an HF contest where you're banging out contacts. I mean, I average one contact every 15 minutes, okay? I think the best I've gotten might be like 10 minutes, but it's, now, when you do a bunch, you're doing a bunch in a row, QSY and through. Well, once I like somebody, I can hop through the bands by just touching a spot and touching another spot. I'm just hitting the band, so I can run through that real quick, and that was one of the key things, is really working the ergonomics. And then you gotta know, it's like, if I make an error, I'm stopping. Because there's no recovering that without stopping. Any other questions? Just real quick.
Brad? That's great.
Brad?
Oh,
Getting integration of GPS into your logging, so that way you don't have to worry about where you are and just have it log it for you.
I need to know where I am, and one of the things about my logging, like to save me entering grids mostly, I can touch a thing and from where I am, it shows the local grids and I just touch it so I don't have to type it. I haven't integrated because you need to know where you are anyway to give the exchange.
I don't know if it would automatically update you as you move that way, oh, we gotta move someplace new and not figure it out.
I know where the changes are gonna be generally, so I keep an eye for them. So, any other questions?
Related, I guess, then you do map out ahead what route you can go to maximize your grids and
Generally
locations?
speaking, yeah.
A simple question. You said, in order for, if someone else is logging you in, and they don't put the /R, it doesn't count as a
Yeah, I can.
contact. Does it matter if it's a // or as long as it's just?
I think people could put a dash in, I think as long as it recognizes that, but it should be a regular slash, that's what's
Or /, okay.
Yeah, and to note, the ARRL has a way of capturing that. If they know you haven't done a fixed station, they can put in an alias and then it doesn't penalize the rover,
Okay.
but it's very hit and miss. I don't know where this cartoon came from. It's made its rounds, but this one was modified by a friend. The captions were switched around. So those were not the original captions. And just the first time I gave you this presentation, I was in Oklahoma City, and which some people may know as the, quote, the 405, depending upon what you may watch on TV. And so I put this little slide in there, which is, yeah, that's a farm truck from Street Outlaws in the 405. So I put that in there just for fun.
One more. Are you gonna be active in January, and what's your itinerary?
I expect to be active in January. I do not know where I'm gonna go. A lot of people want to know in advance if I'm going to be around. Like Pack Rats has a database you can enter stuff in, and sometimes I don't know until the day before, 2 days before. In January in particular, because it's subjective due to the weather, I do have this idea that I want to do a Maine to Florida road. And so I'm thinking about that in January. If the weather's good enough to get through Maine, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, I just don't know on that, but it'll probably be.
Can you briefly describe your flex IF switching arrangement? Are
I
you
don't-
on all bands with the flex?
It's described this way. Reach in the back, you pull off the BNC, hunt around for the other cable and plug in that one.
I have a couple of questions. When you were talking about, height restrictions and so forth, over the years, what have you done to kind of refine your routing? Is it just like hit or miss, or do you pre-plan which route you're gonna take depending on the overpasses? Is there any way to
Well-
research that?
It's fairly simple, because it's 12 foot 6 inches, I'm lower than tractor trailers. So any place tractor trailers can go, I can go. So I basically I try and stick places where I can get on interstates, known highways.
Like for instance, I've seen a few times in the past, I mean, I don't have anything nowhere near as what you have, but let's say you're going up 17 and you get off Route 202, like you're going towards Franklin Turnpike, and you have that overpass there, so it's extremely low. I mean, right there, you're turning around.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean,
So-
I've had a case where a tree came across the road, and it's diagonal, and there was traffic going the other way. And I was getting ready, I could have made the round in the other lane, except the police car showed up. And the police car, it was like, wasn't gonna give me room to go another lane. It's like, turn around, and I had to do a 5-mile detour. Generally speaking, those things are marked with no truck sign. If it starts saying no trucks, I'm on full
So
alert.
you're driving, pretending like you're driving a truck.
Yeah, and I drive this thing, I drive this this thing is sort of a daily driver. I have another vehicle, but I use it a lot, and right now, since my exhaust broke in my other one, it is my only vehicle. So it is well known at the grocery store. Where it seems to be.
One last question, Carl.
Yeah, about the polarization, so using horizontal polarization, VHF, UHF. Is that because that's just a convention, or does it actually work better?
There was, I can't give truly authoritative sources, but because it works better in the weak signal, there's less absorption. I don't know if it affects things in the atmosphere, but in very early days of broadcast, they did some experiments. And that's why television is horizontally polarized. I think FM broadcast, they do both polarizations, but if you have a FM broadcast antenna, directional one, those are intended to be mounted horizontally polarized. They do vertical because of vehicles.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you
Perfect.
very much.
On behalf of the club, we always, honor some of our speaker with a certificate. Thank you very much for a really great presentation. Thank you, this was a great presentation. Any other final questions? Happy Thanksgiving to everybody. Finish the coffee, okay, and there's cookies as well, okay? Thanks.